All right, hello and welcome to another episode of the Mark Moss Show, where we're always talking about the decentralized revolution, trying to explain to you the play-by-play of what the heck is going on in the world. And I like to bring you some education so you can start to understand subjects a little bit differently, changing the way you think about money, as I always say. I like to bring you some of the latest breaking news headlines so you can see what is going on with the play-by-play, the signpost, and of course, some interesting guests so you can listen to some different perspectives than just mine. And that's what we have for you today. I'm joined in studio with Q. He is one of my friends, my research assistant, and the producer. And we want to have some conversations today that I think will help give a different perspective because, believe it or not, him and I don't agree on everything. And believe it or not, that's a good thing. You see, one of the things as humans and as investors is that our own human emotions make us horrible investors. And part of the reason why is because we suffer from all types of biases, and you always have to be aware of what your biases are. And so we suffer from things like normalcy bias or recency bias. So if prices are going up, they're always going up. If prices are going down, they're always going down, things like that. But one of the things that we suffer from is something called confirmation bias. And what that means is like you see the world for whatever it is because of the lens that you have. Your experience is what shapes that. And what most people do is they look for information to confirm the bias they have. But a much better way is to always try to disprove your bias. And so I do that. I always try to disprove my bias. And so I like to talk to people I don't agree with. I call it like verbal sparring. I grew up doing martial arts, karate as a kid, lots of jujitsu, Muay Thai, and I love just putting on some sparring gear and just going at it with some friends. Not hard, but just fun. And it's fun and you sharpen yourself. And so this is like a verbal sparring. So Q, anyway, thanks for joining me today. It's always a pleasure talking to you because we don't agree on everything and it's fun just to dissect that. And it's proof that people can have different viewpoints and still be friends and get along.
Absolutely.
I'll start off by saying, I'm sure you've seen the headlines like, 46, 54, whatever the number is, people that have worked for the Clinton Foundation have ended up dead. And I'm sure you've seen that, right?
Yep.
And Killary, as she's been called, right? And while I think that is where there's smoke, there's fire, and that seems like there's a big problem. And I certainly believe she's one of the most corrupt politicians, probably under Biden at this point, but one of the most corrupt politicians. I saw recently Patrick Bet-David had, is it Michael Weiner or Scott Weiner on his show, and he was the one that was married to Huma Abedin and sent the pictures of the penis or whatever. And Patrick Bet-David went hard on him, and I don't agree with him. He's way different than I am politically. His wife, Huma Abedin, is caught up in all types of bad things with Hillary. But I listened to his perspective, and I have to say that he had a good point. I kind of lean with Patrick Bet-David, and where there's smoke, there's fire.
Real quick, what was the point?
The point was Patrick Bet-David says, "Look, I got all these questions that we want to ask you, but I can't really substantiate any of these. So I want to know why is there 50, 60 people that have died on the Hillary Clinton campaign?" And Scott Wiener's like, "Come on, man, really?" And Patrick Bet-David was not letting this go. Like he hammered, right? But I found myself going, man, Wiener's got some good points. And basically his defense was, look, Hillary Clinton's, 70 years old. I don't know what her exact age, 75 years old. Through the Clinton Foundation and through decades and decades of public service and billions and blah, 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 she's had thousands of people work for her. Thousands of people. She's 70 years old. People die. I'm like, dang, that's actually a pretty good answer. And so my point is like always check your bias and be willing to take in new information that challenges. That's kind of my setup story. That's kind of how I was thinking about it.
No, I like that. It's Occam's razor. The simplest solution is often the right answer. Like it just logic would validate that claim. Like I'm 30 years old. I don't know a lot. I've worked with a lot of people. Most of the people I've worked with are still alive.
Yeah.
Talk to me in 40 years.
Right.
Probably be singing a different tune.
Right, exactly. So when you're 70, a lot of people you've worked for have died. But when you understand how corrupt they are and how much they lie and censor, then it leads to wild speculation. And that's part of the problem with, whatever quote unquote conspiracy. The lack of transparency leads to that. And so when you're always being lied to, then you just think everything's a lie. And so it's tough. But I want to talk about, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and the great humanity equalizer. Because there's a lot of inequality in the world today. And I think both of us agree that we think we are moving into a world that could be much more equal. And so I want to talk about some things that we go through. First of all, what do you think about that? Like humans being, what do you think about human equality?
I mean, I think I have we've talked so much about these things. I know I have a different perspective than you on this. Like I recognize where my perspective comes. I grew up in America. I'm an American citizen. My parents are both immigrants into this country. And I was born here, an American citizen, not because I took a test, not because I passed some qualification, just I won a lottery. Everyone else in my family is back in Iran. They don't have the same access to a lot of the things that I am granted. So I know off the bat, we're not created equal, but the advantages that we are granted in life, it's up to us how we choose to use them. So,
well, hang on, let's back that up. So we are created equal, but whatever regime you may be under might choose to take away some of those equality options.
Fair.
Right. But and to your point, I mean, you could be a 13 or 15-year-old kid that was born in Iran and you don't get to join the financial system.
Nope. Simply because of decisions that are well out of your control.
Yeah.
Or you could be in Africa and you just don't have access to electricity.
Right. So, or you don't have access to the ideas or whatever, right? But I think, and so I think that's the big problem. And I think equality, the way I think about it is like equality of what? Equality of what? So, equality of an outcome or equality of a chance. So, there's no way to guarantee equality of an well, the only way to guarantee equality of an outcome is to make sure that you only have one choice.
Right.
So, Q, take this or leave it. Well, I can guarantee the outcome. You're going to take it.
Of course.
If I give you an iPhone or an Android, some people are going to choose one or the other. And you see that like twins born in the same family with the same parents, same school, same money, same genes, same everything can end up in two different locations because of the choices that they made. So the only way to really get people to end up in the same place is to limit their choices. And that's a very scary world, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like that's the whole premise of this country. We have the freedom to choose. We should have the freedom to make the decisions that we want to make.
So do you think trying to optimize for freedom or equality of outcome is a good thing?
No. If we were optimizing for equality of outcome, especially in this country right now, with the current makeup of the interests of our generations, most people my generation would be a professional athlete in whatever sport they wanted. Most people younger generation would probably just be YouTubers or TikTokers or whatever. We don't need more of those. We don't need more professional athletes as much as I love sports. We don't need more people making TikToks. We need more engineers. We need more scientists.
Yeah. And I think about it like you look at like a Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. Like Elon Musk probably works 100 hours a week, and he's probably done that for 30 years. Do you want to work 100 hours a week for 30 years?
Coming up on 10 years so far.
100 hours a week?
Close to it.
Come on, man. Come on. You don't want to work that hard.
Maybe not for you.
My point is that not everybody needs to work that hard. Some people, I have friends who've just moved down to Nicaragua and live on the beach and they surf all day. And that's great for them. They should be able to do that. There's no reason why they have to work as hard as Jeff Bezos if they don't want it. And so that's like the equality of an outcome. But if we go back like through some historical examples, we were talking before about like I think some of the real discrepancies come from economic or race, class, or values, right? Like, and I think that's kind of where like some of this conversation started. Ben Shapiro was talking about. Frame up what Ben Shapiro was saying in your words.
I mean, the podcast episode was essentially this conversation that most conflict in society throughout history, it's been portrayed as a class conflict. It's the poor versus the rich. It's the haves versus the have-nots. When in reality, it's become this values-driven, I want to instill my values upon you. These are the right values to have. Those are the wrong values to have. It's almost like the way I was we were talking about it is the way we try to sort of package and ship democracy all over the world is exactly that in a nutshell. It's we want you to have our values because we only understand our values. We don't understand yours. So there's that.
Shipping ideology or values And I think that's the big problem that I have with that. I was at this conference like a year ago, and someone had brought their wife, and she wasn't really into what we were talking about. And she asked me, "How do you know you're on the right side of things?" And I think the answer to that question, which I'll tell you, is also what I thought Ben Shapiro was saying. And again, we just see and hear things differently. But she asked me, "How do you know you're on the right side?" And that was a good question. I hadn't really been asked that, and I thought about it, and I said, the reason why I know I'm on the right side is because I'm going to take care of me and live my life the best I can, and you do you. But the other side wants to tell me how to live my life. And I'm not okay with that. I don't want you pushing your ideal vision onto me. And so what I heard as Ben Shapiro was talking was he was giving examples of Silicon Valley pushing values on the rest of the world or the rest of the country, even though they don't even live those values. Mm-hmm. So, in Silicon Valley, they're saying that, don't get married, be transvestite, don't have kids, blah, 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 when they mostly live traditional values.
Well, let's unpack that for a second, because they're working with the social media companies and they're allowing that rhetoric to be perpetuated. That's really what he was dissecting. But for the most part, yes.
Right. And so then people across the country look at Silicon Valley and think that, wow, they're a bunch of liberal wackos that have these values, and that's actually not the case. So the point is that they're trying to push their ideal values onto those people, even though they're not living them themselves. And so we agree on that. I mean, that's kind of totally what I was hearing. And so I think that's back to the question she asked me, and it's like, well, I believe in let me do me, you do you. That's why I'm on the right. If you're trying to tell me how I need to live my life, I don't like that. Now, I am okay having influence over other people. I hope that I can live my life the best that I can, and that would encourage other people. But I don't want power over people. I don't want to tell people what to do. And as a matter of fact, from being a content creator and sort of if you listen to what influencers or content creators or gurus would tell you, most of the fake gurus are the ones telling you what you should do. Most of the real ones are the ones that are just demonstrating it. Right. And so I think that's where it comes down. But and that's where you mentioned like offshoring democracy. It's like we're trying to tell you what you need to do to live. Now he was also talking about how what Karl Marx got wrong, mm-hmm. and how really things are more about values than they are about economics. And I know you had a little bit of a disagreement there. To frame it up, Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. That book led to the largest revolution in European history. And it still has become the one of the bestsellers in economics and political science, which is a problem. But what he did is he said that there's a struggle between two arbitrary classes, the rich and the poor. And I say it's arbitrary because what's the definition of rich and poor? The rich are oppressors, the poor are oppressed. So if I go from rich to poor, now I'm an oppressor. So it's just like this arbitrary line. And really what he argues is that it wasn't about the economic classes, it was about the ideology that they shared. And he gave examples. So for example, early in the United States, you would have J.P. Morgan going to church with the same poor people. And so they really cared about local community. And when you have a local community, you not only have a duty and a responsibility to that community, you hang out, your kids go to the same schools, you go to the same churches, et cetera. And so really it wasn't about the economics of it, it was more about the values of it. Mm-hmm. And I know you didn't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's just an aspect of this where you start to see, I think, to your point, like there's no clear line being defined here. So you have one side saying, hey, this is an argument or case to be used as to why this is good. And then because there's no clear line being drawn, there's no definition of, well, this is what defines someone as I'm sounding like a freaking communist right now defending this, but
don't defend it. You don't have to defend it.
I want to have like a full sort of expansive discussion on this though, because the point and where I was disagreeing was like the revolution it did cause was a revolution of class, because ultimately the people who align with and agree with the communist ideology were those who didn't have anything to begin with, and they saw that as their opportunity to grasp and sort of hold on to and gain something. So from that angle, it was a class issue, but it was a class issue that was guised as these are different values.
But there's two ways in my book Uncommunist Manifesto, we broke this down, that really there's two ways to gain wealth.
Mm-hmm. Work for it and build it.
You can create it or you can steal it.
Oh.
You can take others or you can build it yourself.
Right.
Right? I can grow my own crops or I can take yours.
Okay.
Okay? So that's an ideology. Which one I choose? If I choose to grow my crops or steal your crops, would that be an ideology?
Like if you picked one or the other? Yeah.
Okay. So the Bolsheviks decided to not go create wealth, but to go take wealth. Was that an ideology?
Sure.
So you said it's not ideological, it's economic, but it was ideological.
But it was motivated through economic means.
Sure. So what they do, and this is what Marxism did, it's what neo-Marxism or what we call cultural Marxism does today, is they try to find any underrepresented group of people and they try to agitate them. You're a victim because you're black or because you're a woman or because you're gay or because you're trans or because you're whatever. And then they try to agitate them. So in Karl Marx's day, the best way was through the poor people. And then get the poor people agitated and get them to rise up. Today, we try to get anybody, any underrepresented group or minority and try to antagonize them to get them to rise up.
I mean, that's the whole like polarization of the world we live in. It's kind of what you were talking about in your previous segment. You turn on CNN, you only hear about how awful Trump is. You turn on Fox News, you only hear about how awful Biden is. There's no intellectual honesty in either discussion. It's just they're the bad guy. No, they're the bad guy. It's like they're creating this narrative of infighting, and then you go to DC and you see the video of Kamala Harris fist bumping Lindsey Graham, and then you start to realize like, oh, they want us to fight each other, but they're not going to fight each other.
Yeah.
It, again, creates that us versus them dynamic.
But I think if you dig in deeper and you understand that the reason why they do that is because they need victims, because victims need saviors.
Right.
So you can't get ahead because you're fill in the blank. And so if you only allow me, then I can help you do that, right? Now, I am choosing to have a family, and I'm choosing to work for my wealth, and I'm choosing to live my best life. But for you just go ahead and be that victim and let me help you do that. And so I think that's that kind of push off there. But I would say that they use this, they manipulate these underrepresented groups to get their way. And yes, they happen to be poor or black or trans because they're the underrepresented group that they can pit against them, but it's not them overall. Like, for example, we've had, trans people and black people that have got along just fine. And there's a lot of people actually standing up now and trying to denounce this.
So like you and I the other day were having this conversation about the gentleman you sat next to on the plane, and we were talking to just about, the idea of giving to those less fortunate. And obviously that was a specific example. You've established that, hey, I want to protect myself, my property, my family. Those are my values that I hold dear and true. If someone else's values are not to necessarily say, hey, you need to give some of your property to help others, but rather I want to personally be going and helping others, how do we go about that? Because I feel like we're reaching a point where on one side of the argument, it's everyone has to help everyone. It's like, no, that's an overcorrection. But this idea that everyone has to fend for themselves is also an unrealistic ask. So where's the balancing act here?
The problem, Q, you're probably not going to like this answer. The problem that the world has today is they want to remove all morality and then try to juggle these things. Mm-hmm. And the answer is you can't. You criticize Ben Shapiro because he kept talking about Judeo-Christian values, but the Judeo-Christian values are the answer to that question that you asked. So whether you believe in the Bible or God or Jesus or any of that doesn't matter. In the Bible, Jesus said the greatest commandment is love God and love your neighbor more than you love yourself. Over and over and over, it says, if your neighbor asks for help, do not delay. Give him help immediately. Don't even just give him what he asks. Also take the jacket off your back and give that to him as well. Okay? So when you have that as your guiding principle, these types of questions you're asking me are there. But when you completely get rid of that, there is no God, there is no higher purpose, I'm a God, I do whatever I want, life is for my own enjoyment. If you're Gary Vee saying the greatest thing to optimize for is for my own personal happiness, well, then how do you fit that in? And the question is you don't.
Right. I think my issue, going back to the Ben Shapiro of it all, is he spent the entirety of the episode essentially saying these people who are trying to instill their values on us, like, I don't want their values but let's ship my values to everyone else. It's like, you just spent this whole time telling us why trying to force values on others.
I didn't listen to the whole thing, so I didn't hear that conclusion, and I certainly didn't get that, but I didn't listen to the end, so we'll table that for what it is. But I just think that there's a quote, and I can't remember it exactly, but I'm sure you've heard it, where it's like, in my family I'm a communist, right? In my community I'm a socialist, but then like with my government I'm a libertarian or whatever it is, right? And so what that means is that in my family, with my daughters and my wife, we share everything. Like, I give everything to them, right? But that's my family.
Right.
In my local community, I'm like a socialist. Like, we kind of share and we kind of help each other. But like, the further you go out, the less you do that. And so one thing that Ben Shapiro talks about is like the community was for, it's a two-way street. So it comes with responsibility, and then I have a duty back to that community. I should try to keep crime down. I should try to keep the trash off the street. I should try to keep my lawn mowed, right? But more importantly than that, like, traditionally throughout thousands of years of history, people would go to church and they would support each other. One person has a problem, they come behind them. The Mormon church does a very good job of this. The Mormon church, they support each other. They all frequent each other's businesses. One person loses their job, they all pitch in to help them. And so that's done through that sense of community. But you can't get that benefit from the community if you don't also have the responsibility and pour into that community as well. The problem is like the modern government structures that we have today has dissolved all of that, right? And that's by design, because they want us dependent on the government for that. But the problem is, when you go to the government, you break down that community. And you mentioned Iran, and I've never been there, so I don't really understand how it works, but I spent a lot of time in like Central America, Mexico, South America, et cetera. And I know that, family is everything to them. And you just look at immigrants that even come to the U.S. They live together. They stay in their tribes. They all help each other and support each other. And so it's really through community, through family, that a lot of that's done. The flip side of that is that if it's done too much, it also makes people too dependent. And so you mentioned if we don't give, then what happens to these underrepresented people? Do they fall by the wayside? Well, if there weren't safety nets for those people, we'd have much less underserved people. Now, I support an orphanage in Mexico. Last month, we raised $400,000 for them. It's an orphanage in Mexico. Mexico doesn't have a safety net, and they specifically work with kids with disabilities. So those kids, they're never gonna get there. I mean, they have disabilities, right? They're in Mexico, and so like we need to help them. But I think for the most part, most people could work, right? And so
Totally.
So I think the handouts work against them, would be my guess.
I don't disagree. I mean, like, as you were describing this idea of community and working together, like, that is, in a nutshell, regardless of where you find yourself in the world, whatever religion or belief system you have, at its core, we all are looking for a sense of community. And way back in human history, we are always reliant on and building upon that community, whether it's our immediate family or the extended family.
Because humans are tribal.
Exactly.
And you look at the projects in Philadelphia or Chicago or Detroit or whatever, right? And it's unfortunate what's happening there, but the government basically pays young girls to have as many babies as they can. Because then they pay for their apartment and pay for their childcare. And so its incentives gone wrong, right? Probably meant to be really good, like let's help these unwed mothers, but now they just have 15 babies so they can get paid a bunch of money. And then all these kids grow up with welfare, with that welfare mentality. They don't have a father at home, so it's a bad deal. But even within that, then they start their gangs. So then they even create that community that all starts to help each other out.
Totally.
Right? And so it's just like a natural part of us, right? So I don't know. I think it comes down to the worldview. Like, I believe that people are mostly good, and I believe that people take care of each other, but that's because I do. And to the point that you mentioned before, and if everybody wasn't listening, but on an airplane, I was sitting next to somebody who was very well off, very, very, very high-level business person, and he asked me the same kind of question, which is like, well, if the government doesn't take care of people, who will? And I had asked him, hey, I don't want to get personal with you, but I'm curious, how much of your money do you donate? And he's like, I don't at all. And I said, so I think you're putting your worldview on there. I donate a lot of my money, and so I just don't look at the world that way. And so there was Dinesh D'Souza. He's like a conservative filmmaker. I love on YouTube, they have these channels where I think it's like Americans for Liberty or something, and it'll be like Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro, Dinesh D'Souza, these guys, and they'll go to college campuses, and then like the professors or the students get up and ask them these questions. And Dinesh D'Souza had finished this question, and the guy said, but what about reparations? Shouldn't we be paying these people back because they were oppressed and blah, blah, blah. And Dinesh D'Souza basically said, yeah, you're at an Ivy League school. You should just not go here. You should give all your money and stuff to them. So you go first, and once you've done that, maybe we'll jump in. And the kid was like, never mind, right? And so that's like, you should definitely give your money because you owe those people, but I'll just keep my money, right?
Totally.
And where it's like, for me, like I said, my friends and I, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I mean, we've been raising money for this orphanage for a number of years. And like, we just do that. And like, hopefully we encourage other people to maybe go do something similar, right? And so I think that's like how the world is, or should be.
No, totally. I mean, it points back to kind of what you had mentioned earlier in the episode, this idea that like we offshore the morality. Like we think someone else is going to do it if we don't do it.
No, we want to mandate that you do it even though I don't.
Right. Like the example with all the social media CEOs who will tell everyone, oh, believe all these things, but then they'll go home and have their sort of conservative values that they live by,
right,
that they won't preach.
Yeah, you have all these, man, I mean, you know what's happening with the kids these days, both with the transitioning and with schools and whatnot. And most of these people that are pushing this don't have kids.
Right.
You don't even have kids. Who the hell are you to tell me what I should do with my kids? You don't even have your own. You know, oh, but these are the state's kids, and it's our responsibility. No, it's not your responsibility. You don't even have kids. So I think that's the problem. Now, as we're talking about all this inequality, which is all over the world, we have to think about one of the ways we can help increase that is with our own purchasing power. Gold's been one of the best ways to increase or keep your purchasing power for thousands of years. So I like to keep a little bit, and you might want to as well. Now, people ask me all the time where I get my gold. I like to get it from Universal Coin and Bullion for two reasons. One, because I can trust their gold. There's a lot of fraud gold out there today, and Mike Fulgens, the CEO, the president of the company, wrote the consumer alert on gold coins for the Texas Attorney General. I've met him. I like him. I trust him. But also, they got great prices because I want great prices too. And he's got a very special offer for my listeners. He's going to give you a 1 ounce gold American Eagle coin, which is the most popular gold bullion coin in the world, at his dealer cost. You can't beat that deal. He's even going to ship it for free and give you his 30-page national award-winning gold guide, all for free if you mention my name, Mark Moss. You'll be my buddy. Now, give him a call, 1-800-UCB-GOLD. Again, 1-800-UCB-GOLD. Again, mention my name, or you can go online to universalcoin.com/MarkMoss, universalcoin.com/MarkMoss if you want that deal, his cost on the Eagle coin and the gold guide. Really, the cause of a lot of this, in my opinion, well, goes back to the money. And to frame it up, you mentioned the Bolshevik Revolution. So Vladimir Lenin from the Bolshevik Revolution said that the best way to destroy capitalism is by debauching the currency. Through inflation, we can arbitrarily steal. And through a process of inflation, we can break all relation so that the best way to get rich is through gambling and theft. And so the leader of the Bolshevik Revolution, that's what he said. And so here we are. People say, oh, but this is capitalism gone awry. Well, Karl Marx gave us 10 points of communism, and the United States has 7 of the 10. So I would say we're not in a capitalist society. We're actually 70% communism. Now we could debate each one of those. I mean, is it 100% or 10%, whatever?
We don't have enough time for that.
We don't have enough time for that. But the key piece here is that when the money has been destroyed so much that the best way seeming to get ahead is by either stealing or by gambling. So I'm gonna YOLO into a crypto position. I'm gonna rug pull on a DeFi or NFT.
I'm gonna take a parlay on whatever MLB games are going on. There's no coincidence. Online gambling is picking up right now in this
Right.
moment in our history.
Right. And then it makes me really greedy. So gambling and theft. So then theft, like most people think like breaking and entering. It doesn't have to be that way. I could cheat you on selling you a used car. I didn't disclose problems. I could bill wrong hours. I could embezzle from my employer. There's a million ways we can cheat as well, or steal, not just outright breaking and entering. And so when we're in a society where everybody's kind of looking out for themselves, and really in a business, the leader of the company sets the culture of the company. And if you look at, the founding fathers, they all came here literally sacrificing their life for future generations, planting a tree they'll never sit under the shade of. And the people that signed the Declaration of Independence, most of them ended up broken dead. It wasn't good for them. But today we have leaders that only look out for themselves. I mean, I don't think there's any way to debate the evidence that's come out against Biden and the tens and tens of millions of dollars that he's embezzled. And so what does that mean for the rest of the country? I mean, we can see Nancy Pelosi's the best stock picker in the world. We can go on and on and on, right? And I'm sure there's people on both sides of the aisle, they're all trying to enrich themselves. That's why they don't want to pass insider trading rules.
Totally.
But they're all trying to enrich themselves. And so it sets this culture here. But back to the social issues, it affects the social issues because everybody's looking out for themselves.
I mean, it's a broken system. And if you kind of scale it back and go back enough, you start to realize when the moment we broke the money, is the moment things really started to break apart. Like one of my favorite websites for anyone listening, if you've never checked this out, you should. It's called WTF Happened in 1971. Type out all of those words, WTF Happened in 1971. And what this guy did, Ben Prentice and some of his friends, just took a range of economic charts and they point to 1971, which for historical context is the moment Nixon took us off the gold standard officially. We are no longer backed by gold. We are just pure fiat money. And you start to see a lot of things in the last segment or in the last hour. You brought up just how much the police budgets started to balloon starting in 1977, right around this window of time. So you see and can point to the moment where we started to have the money get ruined. You start to see also politicians become millionaires very quickly, very conveniently for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, if you think about in the book, Thank God for Bitcoin, they made a good case that I really loved, that stuck with me, which is that we tend to think of money as like a tool, and tools could be used for good or bad. With a screwdriver, I can fix my car, or I could stab you with it. It's just a tool, so it's neutral. But they said that that's not the case with fiat money, because fiat money that the government creates is not neutral. It's actually inherently evil. And it's inherently evil because it's built on a system of theft. When they inflate, they steal from you. That's what Vladimir Lenin said. A system of theft, a system of lies. So they're constantly telling us that they're tightening when they're really easing, etc. And theft, lies, and deceit. They're constantly deceiving us about what they're doing with policy, how many dollars there are. They won't go through an audit, etc. So if a system is built on theft, lies, and deceit, it's inherently evil. So then almost anything it's being used for, then thereby could also be used for evil. Now, it's certainly okay. I mean, I use fiat for good, but as a system,
totally,
it's bad. And so then you start to see what's going on in the world. And as opposed to that, like a Bitcoin system is open, it's transparent, it's permissionless. And so it's built, it's trustless. I don't want to say it's truth itself, but it's code. It's transparent, so we can trust it, or we don't have to trust it because it's open and transparent. And so it's like almost like the exact opposite. Now, from a theological standpoint, the Bible calls the devil the father of lies. The only tool the devil has is deceit.
Right.
And God would be called truth. Right. And so you have two different systems. But if we can do that, we change incentive structures. And maybe we go to a world that didn't debauch the currency and destroy capitalism, and we end up in a more of a meritocratic world, meritocracy, right, where we're all trying to do better for each other.
Totally. I mean, at its core, it really just goes down to the government's ability to continue to print themselves out of whatever situation they find themselves in prevents them from having accountability for their mistakes and actions. It's like you're a parent. If your children make a mistake, you sit them down and you explain, hey, you messed this up. This is how it got messed up. And this is how we do better in the future. You learn from your mistakes. That's what my dad did to me. And that's how I grew as a person. For some reason, though, our politicians are exempt from this. They're able to just, hey, I misplaced $2 trillion on September 10th,
again,
2001. And when I brought that story up to you, he's like, that's not the only time.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not an insignificant amount of money today, let alone 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
But there's no accountability for that. In fact, we promote, we give them new titles, we give them new roles in government, and it's as though just, they messed up. Everyone makes mistakes, right? And they are punished and learn from their mistakes.
Yeah.
Everyone except for you.
Yeah. No consequence.
Exactly.
And without consequence, how do we learn? Because success is a horrible teacher. We learn from our mistakes, right? And so if you don't burn your hand when you touch the stove, then you don't know any better. And so when you're constantly able to print your way out of it, I think about like Safety, the author of the Bitcoin Standard. He says that a monarchy is actually a preferred form of government because a monarchy really treats the country more like an entrepreneur.
Right.
And if he mismanages it, then they're run out and somebody else gets to try again. But in this fiat money world, we constantly print.
Do you know how the old Roman Empire used to fund all of its endeavors and do all the things it wanted to do?
By debasing its currency.
Actually, no. Before they started debasing their currency, it was a sense of pride. And the wealthy class would almost like submit applications. They were all assigned. Even if you didn't submit an application, you were assigned, hey, your role within our community is you're to upkeep the roads. Hey, you are the art director of our community. And so the wealthy class was instilled to, you have to fund these endeavors to keep our society
duty and responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah. So maybe if we get away from the fiat money system, that's a system built on theft, lies, and deceit, we get back to a sound money system that, as Lenin said, would be destroyed and we would just turn to gambling and theft. We can get back to a world where there's meritocracy and people are all working towards a common goal. We get rid of the bad players. We re-incentivize people. At least that's what we're hoping. And, when it comes to equality, I like to think of equality of a chance. And really, we need to make sure everybody has the best chance they can have and not optimize for the outcome. And I think having a form of money that you can hold that doesn't get stolen from you arbitrarily and you don't end up in a system like Iran where you can't even get into the global financial system gives us that much more fair world, a permissionless, borderless, censorship-resistant, immutable world. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Mark Moss Show. We've been talking with Q, my show producer, about this inequality and how Bitcoin could fix this. That's what we got. Let me know in the show notes what you think. Until next time.